During the April 3rd earnings call, Disney CEO Bob Iger was not only outright ambushed by the company's own shareholders.
And rather than enlist its artists against oppressive forces like Walt did, Disney instead infuses its cartoon features with mature adult themes that American parents don't want their kids exposed to. That led to 2 box office bombs for its top 2 animated theatrical releases last year.
He was ambushed several times over, no less.
My interest in Disney's corporate charitable contributions was sparked when Disney spoke out on 2 controversial issues: gay sex and abortion. Disney's positions were worse than wrong. They were stupid.
And on top of that, he did a verbal slip-up that might cost the company billions in legal battles and probably end up in Florida's Supreme Court.
We've also always respected and appreciated what the state has done for us. It's kind of been a two-way street. But a year ago, the company took a position on pending Florida legislation. And while the company may have not handled the position that it took very well, a company has a right to freedom of speech just like individuals do.
Oh my gosh, he's making a mistake.
He's not going to do this,
is he? The
governor
got very angry about the position Disney took.
He's
and
making a
seems like
mistake.
he's decided to retaliate against us, including the naming of a new board to oversee the property and the business. In effect, to seek to punish a company for its exercise of a constitutional right.
He's conflating
RCID really and Disney right now, is he?
Against any company or individual, but particularly against the company that means so much to the state that you live in. Countless thousands of indirect jobs have been created.
Ron DeSantis just poured a drink.
Visitors will go through our gates this year alone.
This will
about
be used
8
in
million
court,
of them from
I mean,
outside
this
the
is
U.S.
absolutely going to go to court.
We are the largest.
I'll get back to what Valiant Renegade and WDW Pro were so excited about there. But if you only read the entertainment media complex news and other mainstream news which get their entertainment stories from them, you'd never know any of this. Deadline Hollywood ran cover for Iger with the talking points that Disney proudly stood up to the retaliation of the evil Ron DeSantis, who is labeled as not only anti-business but anti-Florida. This message was repeated by The Wrap, and The Washington Post, and Reuters, and CNBC, and the BBC, and The Guardian, and many, many more. If these news outlets haven't replaced their staff with ChatGPT yet, they might as well, because there's very little journalism going on there. But we will cover what they didn't, because in this video, we'll listen to some of these frustrated shareholders and put their comments into a larger context. Then we'll explore Iger's responses. And finally, why despite all of this, I think there still might be light at the end of the tunnel. Actually, let's begin with the context. For years, both Midnight's Edge and many of our friends in this corner of the internet have covered how Hollywood in general, and Disney in particular, have seemingly given up on delighting their audience, in favor of infusing their content with hyper-partisan, divisive, and exclusionary messaging. But only in the West, mind you. Much of that ends up on the cutting room floor to facilitate a release in wealthy Muslim nations, while Chadwick Boseman will be masked up on Chinese posters, or John Boyega will also be shrunk. There is a level of hypocrisy there, and it would appear it has now gotten to a point where even Disney's shareholders are starting to notice.
The National World War II Museum is hosting an exhibit about how Walt Disney and his company supported the war effort. For example, the Disney studio lot in Burbank was converted into a military base almost overnight after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Disney Studios immediately began work on training videos for topics like how to spot enemy planes. Demonstrating sacrifice, Walt's now beloved classics of the early 1940s like Pinocchio and Bambi suffered early box office losses due to the war effort. Producing the training videos cheaply, Walt said, quote, "I don't like this profit during war when people are out there giving up their lives," end quote. It's quite a contrast to today's Walt Disney Company. As we highlight in proposal number 5, Disney has cozied up to the communist regime in China. According to the U.S. State Department, the dictatorship is guilty of slavery, forced organ harvesting, genocide, and many other human rights horrors. Rather than take the financial hit for principle like Walt did, instead the company thanked the Uyghur torturers in Xinjiang for letting Mulan be filmed in their province, for one example. Disney also capitulates to the Chinese government's every censorship demand in order to retain access to their market. And rather than enlist its artists against oppressive forces like Walt did, Disney instead infuses its cartoon features with mature adult themes that American parents don't want their kids exposed to. That led to 2 box office bombs for its top 2 animated theatrical releases last year. It's also what cost Disney its special tax district around its theme parks in Orlando. Upon his return at the end of last year, Mr. Iger said about the company's critical relationship with the state of Florida, quote, "To the extent that I can work to kind of quiet things down, I'm going to do that," end quote. But instead, we saw last week Mr. Iger escalate hostilities against the Sunshine State regarding the district. That's why Mr. Iger and this entire board that presided over last year's disaster cannot be trusted and should be opposed on your proxy ballots.
This was a call to voting action, so no response was required. But there were many more ambushes like these, and that is unheard of in such a highly formal setting as a Disney shareholder meeting. But as noted, the comment we just heard, and a few others like it, didn't call for a response. That's what the Q&A afterwards was for. At a certain point, the floor was open for random shareholders to call in with their questions. Well, open may be pushing it. There are only a limited number of calls available, and they are screened. That's why one fool asked about some ticket pass, and another even bigger fool expressed concern over Disney having given donations to conservative politicians in Florida. But despite the screening, some real questions got through, and one of them was about the Reedy Creek district in Florida. This is where Iger made the attack on Ron DeSantis that the entirety of the media complex latched onto and ran with in their coverage. But in the process, Iger slipped up, and this is what Valiant Renegade and WDW Pro got so excited about. While talking about how horrible and vindictive DeSantis is, Iger conflated Disney and the Reedy Creek Development District. Implication being that Iger considers Reedy Creek to be Disney, and not its own legally separate entity, and that is a very, very big deal, and an admission that will have Ron DeSantis smiling all the way to the bank. Or so I gather. I won't pretend any kind of expertise in this matter. For that I would refer you to Legal Mindset, and he seems to be of the opinion that yeah, Iger just might have spoken out of turn here. And on that note, let's skip over the other various ambushes, because there were quite a few, and move on to the question and ensuing answer that left everyone paying attention stunned. Without interruptions from me, let's just hear this play out.
Hello, Bob. I'd like to address what I view as the elephant in the room. Over the last few years, Disney has turned from a place of magic for children to an ideological company, serving LGBTQ, IA+, however many other letters you want to add to that, lobbies to groom children. Over and over again, we see how your films and entertainment are increasingly promoting the woke agenda. How can you explain to parents worldwide that you recently celebrated 100 years of history by collaborating with the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus to produce an LGBTQ IA+ themed Disney musical? This is a group who have explicitly stated that they want to indoctrinate children. They literally sang a concert and they sang the words, "We will convert your children quietly and subtly and you will barely notice it." Disney chose to collaborate with these predators to sing to children. How can you explain to parents worldwide that over the next few months, dozens of highly sexualized gay pride parades will take place in Disneyland parks worldwide, the exact places where they used to take their children for fun? Are you surprised that Disney's audience has plummeted, losing 2.4 million subscribers in the last quarter? Parents have simply had it up to here. No wonder you were laying off 7,000 employees from today, in addition to the other thousands last year. No wonder Disney's stock value dropped more than 30% over 1 year. As a Disney shareholder, I have a simple question. Would it not be beneficial for the company to ditch the LGBTQ, IA+, and gender ideology for good? If you are really interested in refloating Disney, please turn Disney back to the apolitical, fun place that it used to be, and I bet that you'll win back both the trust of families and the stock market. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I know you were talking about more than just content. You were talking about experiences that we provide to people, which we actually pride ourselves on being accessible to all people. But let me put some perspective, if you don't mind, create some perspective here too. You know that our company is celebrating its 100th year this year. And we've been telling stories for 100 years that are aimed at entertaining and inspiring families from all over the world. And we're extremely proud of the positive impact we've had on billions of people over that 100-year period of time. And for generations, the stories that we've told have touched people's hearts because they've been infused with right values. They've celebrated heroes and emphasized the value of family and friendship. They've instilled a steady faith in the belief that good triumphs over evil, that tomorrow is always brighter than today. And I think those stories have had an amazingly positive impact on the world, a world that always loves and needs great stories and, heavens, great entertainment, particularly in today's world. And we've recently gotten criticism, as you just expressed, for what some perceive to be agenda-driven content. And I'm sensitive to that, actually. Our primary mission needs to be to entertain, and then through our entertainment to continue to have a positive impact on the world. And I'm very serious about that. It should not be agenda-driven. It should be entertainment-driven. That should be the goal in all of our stories. And while I know we're just never going to please everyone all the time, we should be sensitive to the fact that parents have different levels of comfort with the content that is delivered to their children. I want parents to be able to trust the content that we're creating for their children, and we're committed to delivering age-appropriate content for family audiences while also telling stories that reflect the world around us and that foster a greater understanding, greater perspective, greater acceptance of all people.
Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Mr. Iger, but there are multiple lines of evidence to suggest that parents and family audiences are indeed and increasingly losing trust in Disney. Furthermore, the wild over-representation in Disney movies does not reflect the real world, far from it. And finally, where fostering greater understanding, greater perspective and acceptance is concerned, while it is beyond the scope of this channel, I feel it is prudent to point out that in the last few years, as visibility has gone up, statistics show that acceptance has gone down. In other words, that's a fail on all accounts. But rather than admitting defeat, Iger showed no signs of changing course. On the contrary, he would appear to see himself as the modern-day Martin Luther King, and as such, he seemed committed to and perfectly content with flushing ever more piles of investor cash down the activism toilet. So, is Bob Iger really running Disney into the ground? Perhaps. I have certainly argued that he should have left and stayed away the better part of a decade ago. Even so, there may be a sliver of hope yet. As it is right now, Bob Iger is beloved by the establishment. Case in point, the media is in lockstep running cover for him. But if he were to speak the actual truth and admit that what they've been doing has been bad for not just business and shareholders, but even society at large, he would have to follow that up with that now they're taking a cue from, wait for it, Ron DeSantis going forward. If Iger had said something even remotely like that, the very same media and people in his social circles who are praising him now would be singing a very different tune. So Iger simply can't say that. For the sake of his own ego and legacy, he has to verbally state that he remains down with the cause, but he can't let Disney actually go under either. That would also be bad for his ego and legacy, but on top of that, Nelson Peltz is still there, and if he isn't happy, the proxy fight for a board seat is back on, and this time, Peltz would be gunning for Iger's head. With the share price the way it is right now, I don't think Iger would survive Peltz coming after him. In fact, I think Nelson Peltz and the Trian Group are instrumental in Disney right now, cutting billions in spending and thousands of employees, beginning with the uber-woke and checkbox-ticking Victoria Alonso, who up until recently was thought unfightable. I register that the words of Bob Iger are those of someone doubling down, but I observe that his actions are not. Could it be that Bob Iger is gaslighting his own employees as much as he is everyone else? Because his actions are those of someone cleaning house, and the firing of Victoria Alonso was nothing if not that. I'm willing to see where this goes before writing off Disney completely. In the distance, I see a faint light in the end of the tunnel. Do you, or do you think that light is a train coming towards us? Let me know, and your thoughts on all of this in the comments.